Hi everyone. Uh, Hope you had fun in the last session. I'm Sparsh Kesri from the Developer Relations team at Lambda Test, and I hope you are ready for an exciting discussion on Flutter automation. Flutter has changed the way we build mobile apps, but automation can still be very tricky. That's why we have Sudarshan Silveraj, principal software engineer at Boomi, joining us today. Hi Sudarshan.
Thanks, Ash. Thanks for the great introduction.
Uh, uh,
So, yeah,
yes.
cool.
With years of experience in automation, he will talk us through how Flutter Integration Driver can simplify and enhance your automation strategy. So please drop your thoughts in the chat or use the reaction emoji to show some love for our speaker, and also post your questions in the Q&A session that Sudarshan will take in the end. So Sudarshan, you can start.
Yeah, thanks, Ash. Cool. Hey, hello everyone. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. So, I know like it's pressure on me now because like I'm having a session, post session from Sai and Srini. So, I need to keep up the bar, right? So, cool. So, without ado, like let's quickly pitching. mm, just confirm if you all can see my screen.
Yes, your screen is visible, Sudarshan.
Cool. So, let's go. Okay, cool. So, to give a like a quick intro of myself, right? Like, so I'm Sudarshan, and I've been working as a software principal engineer in Boomi, and I have 10 years of experience in quality assurance and automation. So most of them towards web and mobile. So yeah, apart from the day job, like I do work on some cool open source projects with other teams too. So one such work is the Flutter Integration Driver that we did for APM. So in this session, like we will cover like a most part, like what's the problem statement and how we kind of evolved, and what's the current state we are in, and we will just take a walkthrough of it. So this is going to be the agenda of today, right? So since we are going to talk about how we're going to test the Flutter application, so it's also good to understand like what Flutter is, what different testing that Flutter automation that it supports, and what problem statements do the current stack has, and how we're going to solve it with Flutter integration driver, right? So that is kind of the flow that we will be taking. And if there is any question and answers, like feel free to put it out. We will take it up with me and we will discuss it in detail. Cool. So, what is Flutter, right? So, maybe like someone who might have experience working on it will know like okay, what Flutter is. But like if someone's new to the mobile ecosystem or working on mobile applications, like it might be surprise. Okay, what Flutter is, right? To understand what Flutter is, like it's kind of a framework using which we could able to build cross-platform applications. That means you write your code once, and the same code can be compiled into app that can be executed on different platforms. So you write code once, export it on Android, iOS, web, on the desktops too, right? So that's cool. So it's not something new, right? It's there for a long time. It's evolved like tools like the Cordova. So then comes Xamarin, then we have React Native, and now Flutter is kind of like a new player in the market, and they're kind of leading in this section too. So Flutter uses a Dart for its programming language. So how React Native uses JavaScript and some of the other tools of its own set of things, right? So Flutter has its own programming language called Dart. So all your code, everything will be written it, and it gets compiled to its own native languages. So for iOS, it's gonna get compiled into so for Objective C. Same for Android, it gets converted to Java. So it takes care of all the heavy lifting inside. So as an end user, you will be just writing your code once in the Dart, and it takes care of everything. And as I said before, like they are the leading in the hybrid app development. So it's been developed by Google, and they are the core maintenance. And most of the Google apps that you're going to see are built using Flutter. For example, like Gmail or Google, those are all Flutter applications. So yeah, with that, like now we know what Flutter is, right? Okay, so now how are we gonna automate those things, or how are we gonna test those things? So since it is going to be an application like similar to any other application, right? But there is a slight variation because so these are like cross-compiled platform applications. So if you take any native like your Play Store or whatever it is, right? So it is kind of follows a traditional Android build system. So the app that gonna rendered in application has a very predictable DOM structure. So tools like APM could easily pick the DOM. You could able to automate it. You could able to locate it, right? But when it comes to Flutter apps, right? Like so, there is a concept called Flutter VM. So all the code that has been written in the Flutter will be packed along with the VM. So whenever your app gets installed, that Flutter code will be executed inside the VM. So the communication, like for example, any test automation tool like a UI automated tool or Espresso, right? Like it needs to have a established communication to understand what it is being rendered in the UI. So if you want to locate an element, it's not very straightforward when compared to how we're going to automate it with the native applications. Right? So we need some strategies. How are we going to test it? So the very first is like unit testing. So it's very simple. So you have a code. So you have a lot of unit testing libraries. It has nothing to do with the mobile. So whatever you so maybe you have a function to perform something. You just test whether that function works as expected. Pretty simple. How it works for other app, right? It still works the same way for Flutters too. So then comes the widget testing. So what a widget is? So in Flutter, everything is a widget. Or maybe we could give it as a component, right? Like every UI element that is going to be rendered in the UI is called a component. A button is a component, a text box may be a component, a radio button, a checkbox, whatever element that you're going to see in a screen is it's an industrial widget. So this is also kind of a unit testing, but not just testing the functionality of a code. It is kind of functionality of a element. So now here comes like okay, uh, not just how the function works at the beginning, but also how the interaction works now. Okay, what with different states, how the element behaves. So again, this is done at the code level, so it doesn't have much impact on the device. So you just like import a component, you just like pass in some states, and then you play with it. Okay, what is going to be the expected output? The state is this. So this is also pretty straightforward. You could easily do it. So it doesn't have any dependency on the device. So now comes the integration testing. So now what happens is like, okay, we have tested the code. Now we have tested each individual component. Now we're going to test it in the screen level. Okay, so how I'm going to having a screen. How all these screens embedded or with all these different which is going to look like. How are we going to test it? Again, this doesn't have to be on a device level. We are just going to have a take individual a screen or page component, just test it with different states and see whether the page states has been managed or not, how it is working behind the scene. This is also pretty similar to how you like write test for other platforms too, right? Simple. Now it comes to end-to-end testing, which is the real challenge here. So why it is real challenging is like so in a real world scenario, right? You have a mobile application. It's not just an isolation, right? Okay, I have an app. It just has some static fields. I'm going to interact with it. No, think of a complex application where you need to have a certain degree of integration with another app in the same mobile, or you need to like access device level settings like a Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. You need to access the camera. So it's kind of there's integration with the core device system and also an integration with other app. For example, any payments app. You click on something, it needs to go for open another app, perform some operation over there, or you need to like open the gallery, choose the image. So there's like lot of integrations here. Right? It's not just your app, you're testing it on isolation. So this is where the real challenge begins, when we're going to perform the end-to-end testing. So that is where there is a lag in the current automation thing, and we are trying to solve it using this Flutter automation driver. Okay, so now we have seen like what are the different strategies, and now with that end-to-end part alone, we will just highlight and see like what problems do we currently see. Yeah. So currently, there is a framework called Flutter Integration. So that is a testing framework developed by Flutter team to test the Flutter apps. So that is the only framework that is currently available in the market to test the Flutter automation, and that only supports Dart because Flutter app development is also done in Dart. So the test should also be run in Dart only. So that's kind of again a pain point, right? Like, okay, developers might be well versed in that, they will be writing the code in that. But what if like the test needs to be written by a testing team? So they also need to learn that and they need to contribute over there. So it's not like a feasible for all the teams out there, right? So maybe for teams which just works on Flutter, it works. But for a very big org where like there are like different teams with different tech stacks, if you want to like move like people's between the teams, it's very hard, right? Like the learning curve is bit higher here. And again, it doesn't support native automation use. So it just tests what is there in your application. So if the context switches from your app to a different app, if you want to interact with the core mobile elements, that's not possible with the current framework. And yeah, it's tightly coupled with code base. So your test should also reside the place where your application is. You cannot have like separate those two. So just in case in the distributed teams, like they should be still there in the development code base itself. It's okay to some degrees, but it's not a flexibility, right? Like someone wants not to choose this, like there is no way for avoiding it. Still, they have to keep it in the code base itself. And yeah, parallel execution. So there is no out of the box support for parallel execution. So for example, even though if you have multiple devices available, right? Like unless and until you manually split and run only those test cases on each different devices, there is no automatic way of splitting it. Hey, I have 10 devices, I have 10 test cases. Can it be parallel executed at the same time? No, that's not possible. So these are some of the problem statements, right? We kind of there are a lot others too, but these are some of the key areas which we identified and we wanted to solve it too. So that is where we developed this Flutter integration driver. So which is kind of a hybrid of APM and the integration service from Flutter. We just kind of plug both things. Like we would take advantages of both the thing and just clubbed it into a single entity, so that users can make use of the existing APM's functionality, and also use the Flutter integration drivers, Flutter driver, and just combine it to have a seamless end-to-end testing experience, right? So to just highlight, why Flutter integration driver is better option. First, multi-line support. So since we use APM behind the scenes, you could use any client that APM supports today. So if your team is comfortable in JavaScript, you could write a framework already written in JavaScript. If your team is comfortable in Hey, can someone confirm? There's a network lag from here.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Sudarshan, I think there was an issue with your audio. If you can maybe switch to low definition and try again.
I can hear you. Otherwise,
Hi, Sudarshan. Can you unmute? Can you can you check
Yeah,
your audio? Yep.
yeah. Can
I
you hear me? Yeah, sorry.
yes,
Okay,
yes.
cool.
I
I
think
just turned
it's
back to load definitely. Yeah,
okay. Okay. Awesome.
cool.
I
I'll
think
just
Sorry, Sudarshan and Sparsh. Sorry to jump in. I think it would also be best, Sudarshan, if you can keep the camera off.
okay.
Perhaps the audio would be far better in that case.
Yeah,
And also,
yeah.
one quick thing, if you can also switch to low bandwidth mode, that would also be great.
Yeah, I just
So,
moved back to low. Yeah, thank you.
awesome. Awesome. And, we have also heard in the comments that they'd like the folks would like to hear from the previous slide. So if you can just repeat the last slide, that
Sure,
would be super awesome.
sure. Sounds good.
And Benjamin is asking you to move to Sparsh's house if possible. So if
I'm
you're
just
in
waiting for
Noida,
the invite from Sasha.
yes, if you're in Lambda Test office in Noida, please feel free to join. And
Sure,
Benjamin, this
sure.
is for
Yeah,
you too. Awesome.
cool.
thanks, Kavya.
Yeah, cool. So this is the slide, right? I guess this is where people missed it. Let me move that. Yeah. So I just give another brief. So the problem statements what we currently see in the end-to-end integration of Flutter is like so one is like the Flutter integration driver only supports that, and we don't want that, right? Because we want people to like feel free to use whatever language they're comfortable with, and no automation support for native use. So in end-to-end scenarios, like I wanted to have a flexibility of automating the other flows as part of the automating my flows as well, be it integrating with other apps or native elements of a mobile. So that is not there, and tightly coupled with code base. So there is no flexibility for teams who thinks that like okay, my test should reside out of the development code base. That is not there. And last is parallel execution. So even though like I have the like luxury of running tests in parallel in multiple devices, it's not there. So this is what we are trying to solve. Yeah. Flutter integration driver, it's kind of a hybrid of APM and Flutter's integration capability. So where you could make use of the power of what APM gives when it comes to automating the native use, and Flutter driver for automating the Flutter apps. So to highlight like what's the advantages of using the Flutter integration driver. Yeah, multi-language support. Feel free to use whatever language the team is comfortable with. Easy to adapt. So there is no learning curve at all, right? Like if you know APM, we use the same APM behind the scenes. The driver is going to be the one which we're going to maintain. So from the client side, there is no change. So how you going to execute your test on and any other drivers like UI Automator or XUI test, same concept, use it directly. No need to like learn anything here. So advanced device gestures. So this is where like the real power comes in. Like so one problem we're trying to solve is like how are we going to identify the elements. The second problem is like so when it comes to performing the gestures, right? For example, a double tap or a long press or drag and drop or scroll. So it's again a pain point, like especially in apps like Flutter, like where the elements are not rendered properly. So Flutter integration has its own set of capabilities for performing these gestures. So APM uses these capabilities, and we have like kind of had a hybrid like methods where like with a single command you could perform some complex operations like a drag and drop or like a scrolling. We just made it very simple. And mock camera injections. So this only works for the Flutter context. So if any of the Flutter application uses the like taking camera or like uploading any images, we could able to inject mock images too from your test itself. So that's one other advantage. And native view support, as I said before, like so even your app is going to interact with any other applications which is out of Flutter context or native view. So the driver also supports it. Okay. So before diving deep into like additional context, right? Like so there are like two drivers that are currently maintained by the APM. One is APM Flutter driver, and one is APM Flutter integration driver. Okay. So what is the Flutter driver is like? So before this integration test framework introduced by Flutter team, right? Like there was an existing framework called Flutter driver, Flutter web driver that is called. Okay, so that is kind of like a very initial set of testing tools that the Flutter team launched, and people have been using that for quite long time now. And there are like some gaps, and the Flutter team fixed those gaps and introduced this integration test framework. This Flutter driver is like again a native driver maintained by the APM core team, which works on top of the Flutter driver, which is the whole framework from the Flutter team, right? So there are like a lot of drawbacks in this Flutter driver itself. So that is what like like you cannot run parallel tests. You cannot like it doesn't follow the construct of what W3 spec gives for a web driver, right? It doesn't follow it. So we also kind of overcome all the problems that the current Flutter driver has as part of this Flutter integration driver. That's we gonna look into in the demo next. Okay. So now, okay, the team wants to automate their apps using Flutter integration driver. So what should be the preparation that team do, right? It's very simple. So first is prepare your application. So you have your developer to build your application into an APK or an IPA or a desktop applications, right? So there is a small configuration that needs to be done there to make their automation able to pick your app and run it using the Flutter automation driver. So once that is done, rest all should be simple. You just have a APM server. You need to install a Flutter integration driver, so which is similar to how you install a UI Automator 2 or XUI test. That's done. So then write your test in any language you love, and then connect your device and execute the test. This is the complete flow. Nothing fancy here. So this is like the only part is like the preparing app is something differs from how you're gonna test the other applications apart from the Flutter integration. Cool. So we have like seen a lot of things in theory, but a demo really speaks loud, right? So let's quickly have a demo. So for this demo, like we will pick an application. So this is the app I'm going to use. So this is a very basic Flutter application with some interactions. Like we have different types of interaction here, like for scrolling, for drag and drop. So we have like a lot of functionality. So which is best for testing the driver here, right? And to make this application ready, I also already mentioned it. We need to do some prep. So for that, like let's open the code base. Okay, so this is like a sample code for that application I have demo. So what I have done is, so this is like kind of a standard structure. So whenever you generate any Flutter application, so this is the structure that you're gonna have. So the one additional step that we need to do is like, so I'm going to create a new folder called the test, and I'm going to create a test file under it. This can be on any name. So for my convenience, I've written it as widget test, but you could name it as anything. And under your PubSec YAML, so this is kind of like a yeah, pom.xl or Gradle file or like a package.json in Node, right? So this is kind of like a project management thing. So where you need to list down all the dependencies, your project related metadata, everything. So here you need to add a dependency for APM Flutter server. So again, this is like hosted in Flutter Pub server. So you just need to install it. So like add it to your YAML, and you need to create a test file. And then this test file, all you have to do is so you just need to add a statement here. So that comes on okay under integration test. I have created this APM dot, and I just need to add this code here. So that means we are testing, we are telling our integration server that this is my application that you need to test. So all you have to do is this. So once it's done, there is a specific command that needs to be executed. So which will build your application along with your integration server embedded with it. So we were talking about that Flutter VM service, right? So we need to tell VM service that okay, there is an already a test package available as part of this application. So this command, everything is like documented in the server page itself. You just need to follow the same. It works for any application. It's not like for my use case. This is a common command. So once this is done, under the build directory, outputs APK. So it should give you a APK file for Android. Similarly, you will also get the same for iOS too, if you're going to build for iOS. So I already have built this APK, and I have already configured it to my test. Let me open my test folder now. So I already have this app dropped in here. Okay, this is the first step. So second step is like I need to install the driver on my APM part, right? So for that, like I already have my APM installed. Maybe I will increase the font. So I already have APM. So I will also check if the driver is already there. So to check it, the command is APM driver list. Okay, so this is the driver I was talking about, Flutter integration driver. So if the driver is not there, you could simply install it by telling APM driver install the driver name, and you could say the source equal to npm. So this just like downloads the driver package from npm, and it does the setup for you. So next time when you start the APM server, it will already like pick all the installed drivers for you. So I have already started my APM server. Let's check here. I will go to server. So if you check the logs, you should see something like okay. So under available drivers, I could see Flutter integration. So that means my Flutter so like APM server loaded my Flutter integration driver too. So now my API setup is ready. So the third step is writing my test. So for this demo, like I'm using WebDriver with JavaScript, but the same can be done for Java too. Okay. So let's take a look at the test. Okay. Let's take this test. So what we are doing here, so we are telling something like, okay, browser, uh, we are just finding something. Similarly, how you do for any other element, right? So then we are also doing like clearing value, adding value, click. But if you could notice one thing that is different here is like these keys here, flutter by value. It's not a APM locator itself, right? Like what APM is going to give, we have something like accessibility ID or we have expert. So what is this flutter by value, right? So this is a locator strategy that is specifically applicable for Flutter applications. So for example, let's take the sample app here, and this is going to be the Flutter code. And let's take any example here. Let's take login screen. So let's compare side by side. Okay, so this is the file that has been rendered as a login screen here. So now if we closely look, so okay, there is an element called please login, and that has been rendered here. And here comes another field which is an input here, which is a username, and it has a few other additional metadata like there is something called label, which has a unique value. There is something called key. There is it tells us that a text field. Similarly, if we take the login button, right? So it takes a element of elevated button. It has a text component. It has a login. So these are like lot of metadata available. So now this Flutter integration driver can use any of these metadata to locate this element. So when this app get compiled into a native application and when inspected in APM inspector, right? So you won't have much information like there is no proper ID, there won't be proper like a unique identification to locate that element. But how APM Flutter integration can make use of these labels even in the compiled application? I could find an element with a label called login button, or I could find an element with a key called password text field, or I could find an element which has a text called a login. So this is the core advantage. So even for an application which doesn't have any proper locators, so we could go ahead with any of these constructs here. So in our test, that is what we are also doing. Hey, find an element which has a key username field. Similarly, we will be also using locators like text. See, Flutter by text. Any element that has a text called Java in it. So we may also use something called semantics label. So this is again one of the metadata. So this is the advantage of using it. Even though the rendered application doesn't have a proper locator, make use of these metadatas. So this is one advantage. Let me show you the second advantage. Okay, so in traditional like APM or Selenium, right? Like let's say you want to wait for an element to visible. What we generally use, right? We use WebDriver wait, and you pass in like, okay, this is the element that needs to wait. So what behind the scenes is gonna happen? It's gonna make multiple API calls to your Selenium server and queries the status of the element. Unless it meets the status, it keep on gonna hit it. But with this Flutter integration driver, right? All you have to make is like one single API call to your server and I'm going to say, hey, wait for element to an absent or present. What is going to be that element? This element is again, you're going to find it using some locator and you pass that element and you give the timeout to the server itself. Okay, wait till 10 seconds or 15 seconds. So your client will be idle till that time. So, there won't be multiple API calls made to the server and it is bit fast because the waiting is happening in the server side, not on the client side. So this is one advantage. Let's talk about some gestures too. So for example, yeah. So I wanted to like there is a list or table. I need to scroll until an element is visible, right? So what we generally do, I will have a wait statement. Okay, whether this element is there or not. If it is not visible, I have to manually perform an actions using some coordinates or using some elements, and that is tedious. With this pattern integration driver, all you have to do is like give this one particular statement. So you say, hey, I need this element to be visible, and you need to scroll up, and you can also control the time. Okay, you should make like maximum of 10 scrolls. Beyond the 10 scroll, you should fail. So with this single command, it takes care of like okay, finding that element. If it's not there, just scrolls, and it also returns this element. So then you could make any interaction with it. So similarly, we also have interactions like a double tap. long press we have. So you just need to like do a long press. We have an like out of the box support for it. Similarly for double tap we have. So we have support for drag and drop. So if you see like I have identified two elements here, which is going to be the drag element and drop element. It just gonna performs the drag and drop for the same element, like without anything, right? And to run this particular test, right? So I have a config here. So same config like how you're going to do for any other driver. One change that you're going to do is that you need to mention the automation name as Flutter Integration instead of UI Automator 2 or XUI test. That's it. So let's quickly run the test. So let's go. So the session is being created. I need to restart it because it should be driver, right? I will restart the VPN server. Okay, so Flutter integration has been loaded. We'll go back to the test and we'll retrigger it. So the logs, yeah, the session is getting created. Let's wait. Okay. Let's go. So the wait is happening. So there are no calls from the client. So again, the wait is happening now. There is no call from the client. It's all waiting from the server side. And look at the execution speed, right? Like since we use inbuilt Flutter's testing SDK, right? Especially the gestures like scrolling, tapping, so it will be really fast. So now the scroll kicks in. Look at how fast it is. So we are looking for, I guess, Java or protractor. Yeah, it's waiting for protractor, and now it's need to wait for Java to come. Yeah, Java came, it stopped. So one of the beauty is like in general, if you take any hybrid app testing, right, like you need to switch the context. So for example, you will be in the native view, you execute some command, you need to switch the context to the web view and need to execute it, right? But with this driver, you don't have to do any context switching too. So for example, on the same test, if you see here, so this is like a Flutter component. It interacts with Flutter. On the same test, without switching any context, I can also call any APM's native commands too. So this is the APM's find element, right, which is for UI Automator. So without any context switching, I could able to hybridly access any of those AP methods too. So, but in the current APM Flutter driver, which the APM team owns, so you need to keep on switching. So you need to interact with the Flutter page, you need to switch the context, and if you want to interact with the native view, again you need to switch back to the native view and need to interact it. So we don't have that result. Like it will be like very flowing here. So yeah, that has got executed. You could see the bills, right? So as I mentioned before, so see, there is a first find element calls which happened using the key, and the very next call happened with an XPath. So this is kind of a APM's native thing, but still it is handled without any context switching here. So it also supports, like if you go to like a logs, if there is any error, like there is a detailed logging to. For example, if you search for APM Flutter, like you could see all the logs. You could just like capture the logs here and like take an issue. Like it will be easy for debugging too. If there is any crash in the application, you will be able to easily identify from here. Because like APM Flutter like provides like a rich logging in case of any errors. You could like everything capture from the device logs itself. So yeah, I guess like that is pretty much. We could like maybe open the stage for any question.
Thank you, Sudarshan. It was wonderful presentation.
Cool.
I will take up couple of questions. Let me pull a few on the screen.
Sure.
So one question is from Priyada. How the Flutter integration driver compared with tools like APM and Expresso for test automation?
Okay. So see, the core problem that we see here, right? Like APM can automate Flutter apps. There is no doubt about it. But it poses some challenge, right? Especially identifying the locators. So if the app is not built in the right construct by adding proper labels and proper structures, the rendered application will not have any meaningful labels. It's very hard for you to go and identify the locator and use it as part of it is, and it is so brittle. And espresso, you cannot use espresso for automating Flutter apps. So you may use like a UI automator too, but that has gaps with the locators. So that gaps is what we are addressing it with the Flutter integration driver. Yeah, hope
Thanks.
that helps.
Going to the next question. Can a Flutter driver handle testing a hybrid native Flutter application?
Yeah, totally. So that's the whole point of this the driver itself, right? So the native part is handled by the UI automator. The Flutter part will be handled by the Flutter automation driver in a single test, in a single session. So there is no context switching. So if there is a native view, you use all the methods that is available in the UI automator. That is still available in the client. So if your context switches to a Flutter application, so you could use all the methods that I showed, right? Scrolling, wait till, using Flutter locators. It works for the Flutter context, all within the single driver and a single test.
I hope that answers this question.
Yeah.
One question is, what is device farm?
This is just for managing your devices, right? Let's say like you wanted to do a very minimal like a device farm setup with all the devices that you have, where you could leverage testing your manual applications or running a test in parallel for automation with dashboard reporting everything. So just like another open source tool, we use it for like testing and debugging the application, managing the devices. So that's it. Yeah.
I think we can also share the link in the chat.
Yeah. Actually, like I will
I will.
drop the links to. This is the one. So I have the link to all the drivers and GitHub for this presentation itself.
Okay.
I will also share the links for a device farm. Any other questions?
I have pasted in the chat. Thank you for sharing the link, Sudarshan. The next question is, we do not have any reporting with Flutter integration driver. Do we have any HTML reports here?
Okay. So now what happens, this integration driver is being brought into APM ecosystem, right? So it's the client's responsibility now, let's say if you're using WebDriver IO, you could use any existing WebDriver IO reporting that it's gonna provide. Or if you're gonna use Java with Flutter integration driver, you could build your own report using extend report or something, right? So now the responsibility comes to the client. However you want to generate the report, you could generate. Or if you're using testing, you could just use some like a JUnit XML reporting and use it for rendering. Or if you want to use it via a Cucumber project, you have set of existing reports, right? So now the option is endless. It's all about how you want to consume it. But there is no native support reporting for it. It's client's responsibility. How they want to use it, they could use it.
I hope that answers Rohit. Next question. What challenges arise when testing complex UI interactions in Flutter, and how do we solve them?
This is again like a very like a subjective question, right? Not just a Flutter. Like even if it's gonna be a complex UI application and a native use, it's have its own set of complexities, right? So the one complexities we are trying to address is like okay, the dynamic elements where the locator is not possible and very complex interactions. You don't have to like for example drag and drop or scroll. You don't have to go and do all those math behind it. Okay, finding X coordinates and Y coordinates, then carefully dispatching an action. So those things has been abstracted with very simple methods. All you have to do is like find an element and perform some complex operation with it. Long press or wait or whatever it is. That is what we are trying to abstract it. But when we say complex, like there is endless, right? The use cases based on each application, the complexity may vary, and we need to take a different measures to overcome those things.
Thanks, Sudarshan. Moving to the next question. What are some strategies to speed up the Flutter UI test execution in CI/CD pipelines?
Uh, Speeding up is like it. Okay, again, like it doesn't have to be just with Flutter, right? Like if you take any applications, to speed up things, like there are like different factors when you say speed up. Like you need to carefully evaluate. Like where exactly the lag happens. Like is it in the test preparation part or test execution part? Like the area where your application is really slow, or like it waits for a lot of. Like, for example, your application may make 100 different API calls, and your application is slow while rendering the data because of the data dependency. Your test might be waiting. So these are some of the factors you carefully evaluate. Right? Like where exactly the lag happens. So based on that, you need to take a step. For example, in the Flutter application, the one particular reason the lag happens is like, okay, not just Flutter, in the APM we covered. So interaction between an APM and the Flutter. So here what happens is like we have brought in this Flutter integration inside. So where all the click events or all the scroll events is actually dispatching in the native Flutter, the VM itself. So this is really fast. Comparing to a click made with a UI automated, the click made with the Flutter will be really fast. So those are some of the changes we adapted, but there may be a few other changes which needs to be adapted to, which we are not yet discovered.
Awesome. Thanks, Sudarshan. I will just pick up one last question. And like for all the other questions, we will also get in touch with Sudarshan, and we will post all the answered questions in our community page. So make sure you are using that page for getting your answers, and also you can also connect directly with Sudarshan on his LinkedIn and maybe ask him your questions there. So just last question, how to test Flutter widgets?
Cool. So whatever the things that have been discussed so far, right? Like it comes under the end-to-end context, but there is this framework called you could search Flutter integration test. So this Flutter integration test will give you all the information. Like so you write your test in that. You just import the component that you wanted to test. Write a minimal. Okay, something like this. I already have a sample. Okay, so test. So widget test. See what I am doing is like I'm just like loading my application. So here, like I'm just like trying to find an element with text, and I see like only one test should be there. So I'm tapping on an element here by icon. So this is kind of like a unit testing framework that Flutter offers. So you could just like instead of mounting your entire application, I could just mount a single component to here. For example, you may have a drop down alone. You mount the drop down and you validate, okay, how many drop down elements should be there? What happens if I tap on the first icon? So the framework is called Flutter Integration Test. So I will drop this link so we could refer. Cool.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sudarshan, for sharing your valuable insights about Flutter automation. I hope the audience learned a lot about Flutter automation. And again, if you have any questions or if your questions were unanswered, check it out on our community channel, or you can connect with Sudarshan directly on LinkedIn. Awesome. Thank you,
Cool.
guys.
Thanks, bye. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Bye.